Have you ever met someone who did not say much, did not try too hard, did not perform for the room, and yet everyone felt them? Not because they were loud, not because they were flashy, not because they demanded attention. There was just something steady about them. You could feel it before they even spoke. The way they carried themselves, the way they listened, the way they did not rush to prove anything. That kind of presence is rare, and because it is rare, it leaves a mark. A lot of people think charisma comes from being more expressive, more entertaining, more impressive. But quiet charisma works differently. It does not beg to be noticed. It does not fight for space. It comes from inner steadiness, emotional control, and the kind of self-respect that people can feel without needing to be told. That is what makes strong presence so powerful. It is not built from performance. It is built from substance. So in this episode, I want to walk with you through 15 rules for building quiet charisma and strong presence. Not the fake kind that depends on image, but the deeper kind that comes from calm, clarity, and the way you hold yourself when there is nothing to prove. And the first rule begins here. Rule 1. Calm is the first signal of power. Before anyone trusts your words, they feel your energy. That happens fast, often faster than people realize. Long before they decide what they think about your opinions, your ideas, or your intelligence, they are already reading something else. They are reading your emotional state. They are sensing whether you feel grounded in yourself or whether you are looking around the room for permission to feel secure. That is why calm matters so much. Calm tells people that you are not easily shaken. It tells them you do not need to rush, force, or overcompensate. It creates a kind of authority that does not come from dominance, but from stability. And stability is felt immediately. You can see this clearly in real life. A person who speaks with composure, moves without inner chaos, and does not become emotionally scattered under pressure leaves a very different impression from someone who is always tense, reactive, or trying too hard to control how they are perceived. The first person feels solid. The second person may still get attention, but attention is not the same as respect. That is the difference. People often assume power looks intense, but real power often looks still. It looks like someone who does not need to speed up just because the room is uncertain. Someone who does not lose their shape when the mood around them changes. Someone who remains internally steady even when there is pressure to react, impress, or defend. That kind of calm has weight. And the reason it has weight is simple. It signals self-command. It suggests that this person is not ruled by every feeling, every opinion, or every shift in the environment. They are present. They are measured. They are here. That alone changes how people receive you. Calm does not mean coldness. It does not mean becoming distant or emotionless. It means your emotions are not spilling everywhere. It means your nervous system is not speaking louder than your character. It means you're able to stay connected and warm without becoming scattered. That combination is powerful. Because when calm is real, people feel safe around it. They trust it more. They listen differently. They stop reading you as someone who needs something from the room and start feeling that you brought something into the room. That is where quiet charisma begins, not in trying to appear important, but in becoming inwardly settled enough that your presence starts speaking before your words do. So if you want stronger presence, start here. Protect your calm. Train it. Carry it into ordinary moments. Carry it into pressure. Carry it into conversations where you would normally become too quick, too tense, or too eager. Because calm is not just a personality trait, it is often the first visible sign that a person has learned how to hold power without making noise. Rule 2. The need to over-explain reveals inner uncertainty. There is a moment when explaining stops being clarity and starts becoming leakage. You say your point once, and that should be enough. But then something inside you keeps going. You add more, then more again. You begin defending what did not need defending, softening what did not need softening, and trying to make sure absolutely no one can possibly misunderstand you. By the time you finish, the original point has lost some of its strength. That is what over-explaining does. It often sounds like communication, but underneath it there is usually something else. A fear of being judged, a fear of not being approved of, a fear that your words alone are not enough unless you keep supporting them, decorating them, and rescuing them from other people's possible reactions. That energy can be felt, and once it is felt, your presence changes. Because strong presence does not come from saying everything. It comes from being able to say what matters, then remain still enough to let it stand. When you trust yourself, your words do not need constant reinforcement. You do not feel the same urgency to convince every person, justify every choice, or manage every interpretation. That is where quiet charisma gets stronger. Not when you become vague, but when you become settled. When you stop talking as if your value depends on whether everyone agrees with you. When you stop trying to control how perfectly your message lands. When you stop treating every small misunderstanding like a threat to your identity. People with real self-respect usually have a different rhythm. They explain what needs to be explained, but they do not chase understanding beyond that point. They do not beg to be seen correctly by everyone in the room. They let their position breathe. They let silence do part of the work. That creates weight. Because when someone can speak clearly without scrambling to defend themselves, it signals something deeper than confidence. It signals internal permission. It tells people, I do not need to keep proving that my position is allowed to exist. That is powerful. Over-explaining often comes from the opposite place. It tells the room that you are still negotiating with your own right to take up space. It can make even a good point feel thinner than it really is, because too much explanation starts sounding like doubt, trying to disguise itself as detail. This is why fewer words can sometimes carry more force. Not because short is always better, but because grounded speech feels different. It is cleaner. It does not tug at people. It does not plead. It lands, and then it rests. So if you want stronger presence, start paying attention to the moments when you keep talking past the point. Notice when the extra explanation is truly useful, and when it is just your uncertainty asking for reassurance. That distinction matters, because the more you trust your words to stand, the more other people will feel that trust too. And in many conversations, the person who does not rush to over-explain is the one who leaves the stronger impression. Rule 3. A steady voice carries more weight than a loud one. A loud voice can take up space, but it does not automatically create presence. Sometimes it does the opposite. It makes the room feel the effort behind it. It reveals the need to dominate the moment instead of hold it. And people can feel that difference very quickly. A steady voice works differently. It does not rush to overpower anyone. It does not try to win attention by force. It carries a quieter kind of authority, the kind that comes from being settled enough not to push. When someone speaks that way, you feel that they're not fighting for their place in the conversation. They already believe they belong there. That changes how the words land. Because composure has a strange kind of gravity. It makes people lean in. It makes them listen for substance instead of reacting only to intensity. A steady voice suggests control, and control is persuasive in a way volume never fully is. You can hear it immediately when someone is speaking from center instead of from agitation. Their pace is cleaner, their tone is less crowded. Even when they are saying something simple, it feels more considered, more trustworthy, more solid. That is why lasting respect is rarely built through loudness alone. You can impress a room by being forceful. You can even dominate a moment that way. But respect usually goes deeper with the person who stays measured, the one who does not let emotions spill into every sentence, the one who can say something direct without sounding desperate to be heard. That kind of voice carries more than sound. It carries self-command, and that matters because your voice often reveals your inner state before your content has time to do the job. If your tone is scattered, sharp, rushed, or inflated, people feel that before they process what you actually mean. But when your voice is steady, the message gains strength before it is even fully understood. This does not mean you need to sound robotic or suppress your warmth. A steady voice is not flat, it is grounded. It still has feeling in it, but the feeling is held well. It is not running loose through the room. That difference is everything, because charisma is not built only through what you say. It is built through how safe, clear, and settled people feel in the presence of your expression. A steady voice does not beg the room to listen. It gives people a reason to. So this rule is worth practicing in ordinary moments. Slow down a little. Finish the sentence before reaching for the next one. Let your tone come from your center, not from urgency. Speak as if you trust your words to carry their own weight, because when your voice becomes steadier, your presence usually becomes stronger with it. Rule 4. Neediness quietly reduces your value. Neediness is not always obvious. Sometimes it is loud, but often it is subtle. It can sound like over-checking, over-reaching, over-offering, over-smiling, over-adjusting. It can show up in the way someone keeps fishing for reassurance, chasing approval, or making themselves too available in the hope that being wanted will finally make them feel secure. People feel that energy, even when nothing explicit is being said, and the reason they feel it is simple. Neediness carries pressure. It makes the interaction less free, less grounded, less clean. Instead of presence, it creates a quiet sense that something is being asked for all the time. Attention, validation, opportunity, confirmation. That changes how your presence lands, because strong presence has space in it. It does not cling. It does not lean too hard on the moment. It does not make every interaction responsible for filling an inner lack. The more desperate you seem for approval, closeness, recognition, or a chance, the harder it becomes for your presence to feel powerful. Not because desire is bad. Wanting things is natural. Wanting connection is natural. Wanting growth, respect, and meaningful opportunities is natural too. The issue is not desire itself. The issue is when desire starts leaking as dependence. That is when your energy begins to lose weight. You can see it clearly in conversation. Someone who is too eager to be liked often starts bending too quickly. They laugh too fast, agree too often, explain too much, and subtly rearrange themselves to secure a positive reaction. None of that comes from quiet confidence. It comes from needing the moment to go well in order to feel okay. That need can be felt before the words even finish landing, and once it is felt, your value drops in a quiet way, not because you became less worthy as a person, but because neediness weakens the emotional impression you leave. It tells the room that your center is still too dependent on what comes back from others. Quiet charisma grows in the opposite direction. It grows when you want connection without chasing it, when you value opportunities without begging for them, when you can be warm, open, and sincere without making other people responsible for stabilizing your self-worth. That kind of energy feels different. It feels calm, chosen, clean. It also creates respect, because people tend to trust what is not pulling at them. They tend to feel more deeply the presence of someone who is not trying to extract something from every exchange. A person with inner steadiness can still care, still enjoy, still engage fully, but there is no grasping in it, no invisible emotional demand hiding underneath the interaction. That is powerful. So this rule is not asking you to become distant. It is asking you to become inwardly full enough that your presence stops reaching outward in desperation. Let people feel your warmth, but not your need. Let them feel your sincerity, but not your hunger for approval. Because the less needy your energy becomes, the more natural your presence starts to carry real weight. Rule 5. Silence has weight when it is chosen well. Silence is often misunderstood. A lot of people treat it as emptiness, awkwardness, or weakness, as if every pause must be filled and every moment must be answered immediately. But well-chosen silence does something words often cannot do. It creates gravity. When someone is comfortable with silence, you feel it right away. They are not scrambling to manage the room. They are not rushing to prove they are interesting, intelligent, or in control. They can let a moment breathe. They can let a sentence land. They can hear what is happening beneath the surface instead of panicking and filling every gap with noise. That kind of restraint has power in it, because not every moment deserves your reaction. Not every question deserves an instant answer. Not every awkward pause is a problem that needs fixing. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is hold your position and let the silence do part of the work. A rushed response often gives away more than it should. It can reveal insecurity, nervousness, or the need to keep control of how the interaction feels. Silence, on the other hand, can signal composure. It can show that you are not afraid of stillness, not afraid of being observed, not afraid of letting your presence stand without constant verbal support. That changes how people experience you. Silence also sharpens what you do choose to say. When you are not speaking endlessly, your words carry more intention. They feel selected, not spilled. And people notice that. They begin listening more carefully because your speech no longer feels cheapened by excess. There is another layer to this too. Silence protects you from unnecessary reaction. It gives you a second to see what the moment actually needs. Sometimes the room is asking for an answer. Sometimes it is asking for patience. Sometimes another person is testing whether they can rush you, provoke you, or pull you into a lower level of energy. If you answer everything immediately, you lose the chance to notice that. Silence gives you that chance. It lets you stay in command of your timing, and timing matters more than people think. A person who can pause without shrinking and remain calm without rushing to explain carries a very different kind of presence from someone who reacts to every opening the second it appears. This does not mean becoming cold or artificially mysterious. Forced silence feels just as performative as forced talking. The point is not to act unavailable. The point is to become settled enough that you do not feel compelled to fill every space. That is where the weight comes from. So if you want stronger presence, practice letting small moments stay quiet. Let the pause exist. Let the question sit for a breath before answering. Let your words arrive from intention, not from reflex. Because silence, when it is chosen well, does not make you disappear. It makes your presence feel harder to ignore. Rule 6. Deep listening makes you instantly more memorable. There is a kind of presence that people do not forget, and a lot of it has nothing to do with talking. It comes from listening well, not listening just to reply, not listening while secretly preparing your next point. Not listening with half your attention while your mind is somewhere else. I mean the kind of listening that makes the other person feel fully met for a moment. That kind of attention is rare, and because it is rare, it leaves a mark very quickly. You can feel the difference immediately when someone is truly there with you. Their face stays with the conversation. Their energy is not rushing ahead. They are not trying to turn everything back toward themselves. They are actually receiving what is being said. That creates depth, and depth is memorable. A person who listens deeply does something powerful without trying too hard. They make the room slow down a little. They make the interaction feel more real. They stop people from feeling like they have to fight for space. That alone makes their presence stronger, because presence is not only about how you express yourself. It is also about how fully you can hold another person in your attention. That is part of quiet charisma. It is not just being interesting, it is making people feel that they were truly heard in your company. A lot of conversation feels thin because attention is thin. Everyone is waiting for their turn. Everyone is trying to add something. Everyone is speaking, but very little is being held. So when someone actually listens with calm, patience, and real curiosity, it feels almost unusual. That unusual quality becomes memorable. Deep listening also changes your own presence from the inside. It makes you less reactive, less performative, less concerned with constantly shaping how you appear. It pulls you out of self-consciousness and into contact. And that shift is powerful because people trust someone more when they feel that person is genuinely with them, not subtly performing at them. There is also strength in restraint here. You do not have to interrupt every silence. You do not have to prove you understand too quickly. You do not have to show how much you know in every exchange. Sometimes, the strongest thing you can offer is full attention without trying to decorate it. That kind of listening gives your words more value too, because when you finally do speak, it feels considered. It feels earned. People can sense that you were not just waiting, you were taking things in. Your response carries more weight because your attention did. So if you want stronger presence, do not only work on how you speak, work on how you listen. Let people feel your steadiness there. Let them feel that your attention is not cheap, scattered, or constantly slipping away. Because a person who listens deeply does not just seem polite, they seem rare. And rare presence is usually the kind people remember. Rule 7. Speak with precision, not excess. A lot of presence is lost in unnecessary words. Not because speaking is bad, but because too much speech can weaken the force of what you actually mean. When every thought is said out loud, when every point is stretched too far, when every silence is filled before it has time to breathe, your words start losing density. They may still be heard, but they no longer land with the same weight. Precision changes that. When someone speaks with precision, you can feel the difference. Their words are not crowded. They do not wander too far from the point. They do not keep adding layers just to make sure the room stays with them. They say what matters, and then they let it stand. That kind of speech feels stronger because it feels chosen. There is discipline in it. It shows that the person is not speaking just to release energy. They are speaking because they have something worth placing into the moment. And when words come from that place, people tend to listen more carefully. Too much talking often creates the opposite effect. It can make even a good idea feel diluted. It can make confidence sound uncertain. It can make presence feel lighter than it really is, simply because nothing is being held back long enough to gather force. That is why fewer words can carry more authority. Not always fewer in number for the sake of sounding sharp, but fewer in the sense that what is unnecessary has been removed. The point is cleaner. The tone is steadier. The sentence is not doing extra work to prove something it should already trust. And people notice that. A person who speaks with precision usually feels more grounded, more thoughtful, more in command of themselves. Their speech suggests that they are not afraid of simplicity, and that matters because unnecessary excess often comes from nervousness. It comes from trying to fill, impress, soften, control, rescue, and explain all at once. Precision comes from a different place. It comes from trust. Trust in your meaning. Trust in your timing. Trust that your words do not need to be inflated to have value. This does not mean becoming stiff or overly calculated. The goal is not to sound polished in an artificial way. The goal is to stop wasting your own impact. Let your words carry intention. Let them have shape. Let them arrive without dragging 10 extra sentences behind them. That is where verbal presence begins to strengthen. So this rule is worth practicing in small ways. Say a little less than your impulse wants to say. Notice when the point has already landed, and stop there. Let clarity do the work that excess keeps trying to do through quantity. Because when your speech becomes more precise, people start feeling the importance of your words before they even fully explain why.
Rule 8. Respectful directness leaves a stronger mark than aggression ever will.
There is a big difference between force and strength, even though they can look similar for a moment. Aggression often tries to create impact by pressure. It pushes harder, speaks sharper, and leans on intensity to make a point feel important. But after the moment passes, what usually remains is not respect. It is tension, distance, sometimes even distrust. Respectful directness works in a completely different way. It says what needs to be said without unnecessary heat. It does not hide, but it does not attack. It does not decorate the truth until it becomes harmless, and it does not weaponize the truth just to feel powerful. It keeps the message clear while keeping the self under control. That is what gives it weight. When someone can be honest without becoming harsh, people feel something deeper than confidence. They feel maturity. They feel that this person is not speaking from wounded pride or emotional overflow. They are speaking from clarity. And clarity has a steadier kind of force than aggression ever does. Aggression may win a few seconds of control, but directness earns a different kind of authority. It makes people feel that you mean what you say, and that you do not need to raise the emotional temperature just to make your words matter. That is rare, and because it is rare, it stays with people. You can hear it in the tone. A direct person does not ramble around the point, but they also do not slam the point into the room. They place it cleanly, calmly, without apology, and without unnecessary violence. That kind of honesty leaves a much stronger mark because it feels deliberate. It also protects your presence. The moment aggression takes over, your energy starts losing refinement. Even if you are technically right, the emotional force can make the message feel less trustworthy. People stop hearing only the truth and start reacting to the heat around it. Your point may still land, but it lands with damage attached to it. Respectful directness avoids that trap. It lets you stay firm without becoming crude. It lets you draw a line without performing anger. It lets you speak with conviction while keeping your dignity intact. And that combination is powerful because it shows that your strength is not dependent on intimidation. You do not need to overpower the room to be taken seriously. You do not need to make someone feel small in order to stand tall. Real presence is often revealed by how little force you need in order to remain clear. So this rule asks for discipline, especially in difficult conversations. Say what you mean. Do not soften the truth until it disappears. But do not let ego turn honesty into aggression either. Keep the message clean. Keep your posture steady. Let your self-control stay visible inside your clarity. Because people may react to aggression, but they remember respectful directness in a very different way. It feels stronger because it is. Rule 9. Protect your warmth, but keep your gravity. Warmth matters. It helps people relax around you. It makes you easier to trust. It keeps your presence human. A little humor, a little softness, a little openness can make others feel that being around you is not a performance or a test. That kind of warmth is valuable. But warmth loses some of its power when it turns into constant performance. That is where gravity starts to disappear. You can feel the difference in someone almost immediately. One person is warm in a grounded way. They smile, they connect, they bring ease into the room, but there is still something settled underneath it. Another person keeps entertaining, keeps filling space, keeps turning everything into energy, charm, or reaction. At first, that can seem engaging, but after a while it starts feeling lighter than it should, because too much performance weakens depth. It sends the message that the person is always managing the atmosphere, always trying to keep attention alive, always making sure the room stays responsive. And once that happens, presence starts leaning outward too much. It depends too much on being received well, laughed with, noticed, enjoyed. Quiet charisma needs something steadier than that. It needs warmth, yes, but it also needs gravity. That inner sense that you are not available for every tone, every joke, every impulse to make yourself more digestible. Gravity is what keeps your warmth from becoming dilution. It protects the part of you that does not need to turn every interaction into a performance just to feel connected. That balance is powerful. A person with warmth and gravity feels inviting but not cheap. Easy to be around, but not easy to misread. There is kindness in them, but also substance. They can laugh, but they do not lose their center. They can be light without becoming flimsy. That is the difference people remember, because charm alone can fade quickly. Depth is what gives charm a longer life. Without depth, warmth can start feeling like a strategy. With depth, warmth feels sincere. It lands differently because there is something underneath it that stays still. This is why protecting your gravity matters. You do not have to perform your personality all the time. You do not have to turn every silence into a joke or every interaction into proof that you are likable. Sometimes the strongest thing is to let your warmth remain simple and let your steadiness do the rest. That creates a more grounded kind of magnetism. So this rule is really about balance. Stay warm enough that people feel your humanity, but do not trade away your depth just to keep the room comfortable. Let there be ease in you, but also weight. Let people feel that you can connect without scattering yourself, because the most memorable presence is rarely only charming. It is warm, yes, but it also has something solid behind it. Rule 10. The need to impress is what makes many people forgettable. There is a strange irony here. The harder someone tries to impress, the easier it becomes to feel the effort. And once the effort becomes visible, some of the presence disappears with it. You can notice this almost immediately. A person is trying a little too hard to sound important, a little too eager to be admired, a little too invested in making sure the room sees their value. Even if they are talented, intelligent, or interesting, the energy starts working against them. Instead of depth, you feel tension. Instead of quiet confidence, you feel presentation. That is what makes so many people forgettable. Not because they have nothing to offer, but because they keep placing the focus on how they are being received. And the moment approval becomes the mission, presence begins to thin out. Their attention is no longer fully in the moment. Part of it is always busy asking, did that land well? Did they notice me? Did I seem impressive enough? That inner noise changes everything. It makes conversation less real. It makes expression less natural. It pulls the person away from self-possession and into performance. And performance, even when polished, rarely leaves the same mark as someone who simply seems at ease in their own value. Quiet charisma begins when that need starts fading. Not when you stop caring completely about how you carry yourself, but when you stop needing every interaction to confirm that you matter. You no longer walk into a room trying to win admiration. You walk in grounded, present, clear. You let your character, your steadiness, and your way of speaking do the work without constantly checking whether it is working. That is a very different energy. It feels lighter but stronger. People relax around it because they do not feel managed. They do not feel like they are being pulled into someone else's need for recognition. They can simply experience the person in front of them. And that is usually what makes someone memorable in the first place. A memorable presence does not beg to be noticed. It gives people something real to notice. That may be calm, it may be clarity, it may be depth. It may be the way someone listens, the way they speak, the way they do not rush to decorate themselves. Whatever it is, it feels natural because it is not constantly reaching outward for approval. And that is where self-possession becomes your center. You stop performing confidence and start building it. You stop chasing admiration and start carrying yourself with more honesty. You stop trying to look valuable and begin living in a way that feels internally settled. That shift is powerful because people trust what is not forcing itself on them. They remember what feels real. They remember the person who did not spend the whole interaction trying to prove something. So this rule asks for a quiet kind of maturity. Let go of the urge to impress every room, every person, every conversation. Focus less on being seen as special and more on becoming inwardly solid. Because in the end, what makes many people forgettable is not that they were too small. It is that they were too busy trying to be impressive to feel truly real. Rule 11. Not every thought needs to be shared. There is a difference between honesty and overexposure. Honesty gives people something real. Overexposure gives away too much too quickly, often before trust, timing, or depth have had the chance to form. And once that happens, something important can get lost. Your presence becomes lighter because nothing is being held with care anymore. This is why maturity is not about saying everything the second you feel it. It is about knowing that depth needs rhythm. Some thoughts need time. Some feelings need to be understood before they are expressed. Some parts of you become stronger when they are protected first, not immediately placed into the room for everyone to handle however they want. That is not hiding. That is discernment. A person with strong presence usually understands this quietly. They are open, but not exposed everywhere. They are real, but not impulsively revealing every layer of themselves at once. They know that when everything is shared instantly, something of the weight disappears. Mystery is not the goal here. Self-respect is. Because not every thought deserves air just because it appeared. Some thoughts are passing noise. Some are emotional residue. Some only need reflection, not expression. And some become more powerful precisely because they were held long enough to become clear. That is where restraint becomes attractive in the deeper sense. It shows that you are not ruled by the urge to empty yourself into every moment. You can feel something and still decide whether this is the right place, the right person, the right time, or even the right version of the thought to share. That creates gravity. People feel when someone has an inner life that is not constantly leaking. It makes their words more valuable because there is selection in them. There is timing. There is evidence that this person does not just speak because something crossed their mind. They speak when what they are saying is ready to carry weight. That is a very different kind of presence from someone who narrates everything in real time. And this matters in relationships too. Oversharing can create a false feeling of depth. It can make something feel intimate before it is actually grounded. Then later, there is discomfort, imbalance, or the quiet feeling that too much was given before enough was built. Strong presence moves more carefully than that. It lets connection grow without throwing every private layer into the light at once. It understands that being real does not require being instantly transparent about every thought, every wound, every reaction, or every desire. Some things are stronger when they are revealed with intention instead of impulse. So this rule is not about becoming closed off. It is about becoming more deliberate. Keep your honesty, but give it structure. Let your openness stay warm, but not careless. Protect the parts of you that deserve timing. Because depth loses force when everything is exposed immediately, and presence grows when people can feel that your inner world has substance, not just constant output. Rule 12. Reactive people lose their presence. First, the fastest way to lose presence in a room is not to say the wrong thing. It is to lose control of yourself. The moment someone becomes too reactive, something shifts immediately. Their energy starts spilling outward, their face changes, their tone tightens, their timing gets worse, and the whole room can feel that they are no longer fully in command of themselves. Even if their point is valid, the force of it weakens because their state is now speaking louder than their words. That is why reactivity costs so much. It makes you easier to read, easier to move, easier to unsettle. A person who reacts too quickly gives the room access to their emotional wiring. Everyone can see what touched a nerve, what made them defensive, what made them rush, what made them lose their center. And once that happens, presence starts disappearing. Because strong presence is not only about how you enter a room, it is about whether you can stay grounded when something in the room pushes against you. That is where the real difference appears. Anyone can look composed when everything feels smooth. The deeper test comes when there is tension, pressure, disrespect, interruption, or unpredictability. That is when reactivity reveals itself. And the problem is not just the reaction itself, it is what happens after. A reactive person usually starts making smaller decisions from a weaker state. They answer too fast. They explain too much. They interrupt their own clarity. They let the moment choose their behavior instead of choosing it themselves. That weakens presence very quickly. A person who can pause, think, and respond with control leaves a completely different impression. They do not rush to defend their ego. They do not let one emotional spike rearrange their whole energy. They stay in contact with themselves long enough to decide how they want to move. That is where real strength becomes visible. It is not coldness, it is command, and people feel it immediately. They trust it more. They respect it more. They remember it more. Because calm response has weight in a way emotional reaction rarely does. One feels expensive, the other feels accessible. So this rule is worth taking seriously. If you want stronger presence, do not only work on your voice, your posture, or your words. Work on the moments that usually pull you out of yourself. Notice what speeds you up. Notice what makes you sharper than necessary. Notice what makes you lose your shape. That is the real training. Because reactive people lose their presence first, long before they realize it. But the person who can stay steady under pressure becomes the one whose presence actually holds. Rule 13. Kindness needs clear boundaries. Kindness becomes weaker the moment it loses structure. Without boundaries, even good-hearted people start giving off the wrong signal. They may still be warm, still generous, still patient, but if there is no line around that warmth, others begin to feel that everything is available. Your time, your energy, your attention, your willingness to tolerate what should not be tolerated. That changes presence in a very quiet way. Because kindness without limits can start looking like uncertainty. It can make people wonder whether your softness comes from strength or from the fear of disappointing others. And if that question starts leaning in the wrong direction, the respect around your presence begins to thin out. This is why boundaries matter so much. They protect the meaning of your kindness. They make it clear that your warmth is chosen, not extracted. That your respect for others does not require disrespect toward yourself. That your patience has depth, but it also has an edge where necessary. That edge is important. A person with strong presence can be courteous without becoming easily used. They can be understanding without becoming endlessly available. They can be gentle without becoming vague. There is kindness in them, but there is also definition. People feel both, and that combination is powerful. Because once boundaries are visible, your kindness becomes more valuable, not less. It no longer feels automatic. It feels intentional. It feels like something you offer from stability, not something people can keep pulling from without consequence. This also changes how you feel inside yourself. When boundaries are missing, resentment usually starts building somewhere underneath the surface. You keep saying yes when you mean no. You keep tolerating what drains you. You keep being agreeable long after your inner world has started tightening. That kind of inner contradiction eventually affects your presence. People may still see you as nice, but they also feel the hidden tension. Clear boundaries remove that. They let your kindness stay clean. They allow you to be warm without becoming overextended, and open without becoming invaded. You stop confusing goodness with self-erasure. You stop assuming that being pleasant means you must always be flexible, always accommodating, always easy to access. That is not real strength. Real strength is being able to stay kind while still protecting what matters: your time, your standards, your emotional space, your dignity. The more clearly you can do that, the stronger your presence becomes, not harder in a cold sense, just more defined. And definition creates respect. So this rule is not asking you to become sharper than you need to be. It is asking you to stop making your kindness so soft that people forget there is a center inside it. Let your courtesy remain visible, but let your limits be visible too. Because kindness has more weight when people can feel that it comes from self-respect, not from the inability to say enough. Rule 14. Do not let praise inflate you or criticism unmake you. A strong presence becomes rare the moment it stops rising and falling with every opinion. Praise can feel good, and criticism can sting. That part is human. The problem begins when either one starts deciding too much for you. If admiration makes you bigger than you are, or rejection makes you forget who you are, then your center is still sitting in other people's hands. And people can feel that. Someone who gets overly lifted by praise often starts leaning into performance. Their energy changes. They begin protecting the image that got rewarded. Their presence becomes less natural because now part of them is busy trying to stay impressive. On the other side, someone who gets deeply shaken by criticism can lose shape just as quickly. Their voice changes, their confidence drops, and their whole presence starts negotiating with the room. That is why stability matters more than approval. Quiet charisma grows in people who can receive admiration without getting inflated by it, and hear criticism without letting it tear apart their self-respect. That does not mean they become numb. It means they stay proportionate. They do not turn applause into identity, and they do not turn rejection into collapse. That kind of steadiness has weight. Because once people realize that praise does not make you perform harder, and criticism does not make you unravel, they start experiencing you differently. You feel more solid, more self-possessed, less dependent on emotional permission from the outside. Your presence becomes calmer because it is no longer constantly adjusting itself according to how it was received. This is one of the clearest signs of inner maturity. You know who you are well enough that compliments can be appreciated without becoming intoxicating. You know yourself well enough that criticism can be examined without becoming destructive. You can take in what is useful and leave what is not, without turning every reaction from others into a verdict on your worth. That protects your gravity, because the moment you become too hungry for praise, your energy starts reaching outward. The moment you become too fragile around criticism, your energy starts shrinking inward. In both cases, your presence loses some of its steadiness. But when you remain grounded in both admiration and rejection, something stronger begins to form. People feel that you are not easily enlarged and not easily reduced. That is rare. And rare presence is usually built that way through emotional balance, not emotional dependence. Through self-respect that stays intact whether the room is warm or cold, through a kind of internal anchor that does not move every time someone approves or disapproves. So this rule asks for discipline in both directions. Enjoy appreciation, but do not build yourself on it. Listen to criticism, but do not let it dismantle your center. Let both pass through your awareness without becoming your foundation. Because the stronger you remain in both praise and criticism, the more unmistakable your presence becomes. Rule 15. Presence is built in private before it is felt in public. This may be the most important rule of all because it explains why presence cannot be faked for very long. What people feel from you in public is usually a reflection of what you have practiced in private. Your self-respect, your emotional discipline, your inner stability, your relationship with silence, your ability to stay calm under pressure, your way of speaking to yourself when nobody is around. All of that eventually shows. That is why real presence is not created in the moment you walk into the room. It is created long before that. It is created in the private moments where nobody is clapping for you, in the way you handle frustration when there is no audience, in the way you carry yourself when nothing external is rewarding you, in the way you keep your standards even when nobody would know if you lowered them. That is where depth is formed. And people can feel that depth. They may not be able to explain it perfectly, but they feel the difference between someone who is trying to appear confident and someone who has been building quiet strength away from attention. One feels arranged, the other feels real. That is what makes presence so difficult to imitate. You can copy gestures, you can rehearse phrases, you can even train yourself to look composed for a while. But if your inner life is still chaotic, insecure, reactive, or dependent on constant validation, that truth eventually leaks through the performance. Presence always reveals the private life behind it. A person who has practiced self-command in solitude usually brings a different energy into public spaces. Their calm is less fragile. Their words are less needy. Their silence feels more natural. Their boundaries do not look borrowed. Their confidence does not need as much support from the room because it was not built there in the first place. That is why this rule matters so much. If you want stronger presence, do not only work on how you appear when others are watching. Work on how you live when nobody is watching. Strengthen the private habits that shape your inner world. Clean up the emotional patterns that keep pulling you out of yourself. Build the kind of character that remains intact, even without recognition. Because public presence is often just private discipline made visible. And once that becomes real, people do not only hear your words differently, they feel that there is something settled behind them. That is what stays with them. Quiet charisma is not something you manufacture by acting mysterious. Strong presence is not built by trying to dominate every room you enter. In fact, the harder someone tries to look powerful, the more often the effort becomes visible. And once the effort becomes visible, some of the weight is gone. The deeper kind of presence grows differently. It grows from inner steadiness, from emotional discipline, from self-respect that does not need to be announced every 5 minutes. It grows from knowing how to stay calm, how to listen, how to speak with care, how to hold silence without discomfort, and how to protect your energy without becoming cold. That is where the real force comes from. Because when there is less noise inside you, your words carry more weight. Your silence starts meaning more. Your eye contact feels steadier. Your voice lands differently. Even the way you enter a room begins to feel more grounded. Not because you're trying to create an effect, but because something in you has become harder to shake. And people always feel that. They feel when someone is inwardly settled. They feel when someone is not begging for approval. They feel when kindness is backed by boundaries. They feel when confidence is real enough not to become performance. That is why presence is never only about technique. Technique can help, yes. But what gives presence its force is what those techniques are sitting on top of. If the inner world is scattered, the outer expression usually carries that too. But when the inner world becomes clearer, calmer, and more disciplined, your presence starts changing without needing to force it. So maybe that is the real takeaway from all of this. Do not focus only on appearing more charismatic. Focus on becoming more grounded. Do not chase attention. Build self-possession. Do not perform confidence. practice emotional steadiness until confidence begins to appear on its own. Because quiet charisma is not built in the moment you try to impress someone. It is built in the kind of person you become when there is nothing to prove.